Howdy, welcome back. Today we'll be talking about the pros and cons of early digital cameras, certain types of Polaroids, film SLRs, and flashes. I have a bunch of these laying around, so I'm basically showing you my collection, but if you have some laying around or if you're looking to find one of these, here are some things you should know before you jump into film and this vintage retro line. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, let's start with Polaroids. The first Polaroid I have in my collection is an old one, and it's the Polaroid land camera. This is a really cool looking camera, and it was actually my grandfather's, so I had it sitting around. But the thing is that they don't make this film anymore. You can find it, but good luck trying to use it. It's a huge hit or a miss, and it's expensive. So that's a disadvantage of using one of these old Polaroid cameras. This camera in particular, you have a little bulb that goes in here, which you have to buy those bulbs. And again, I don't even know if they make those and if they work. It's definitely a cool piece that you can have laying around, and it adds to the collection. And these really don't go for that much money online. But again, is it worth buying? Definitely not. Stay away from the old Polaroids that use this pack film. Next. The second and final Polaroid that I have is the Polaroid One Step. This camera is very cool looking, and I got it for $3 at a thrift store, so they go really cheap, and online they're cheap too. The only issue with this camera is it uses SX70 film, which is more expensive, and they do not sell it at Best Buy. If you're looking to buy a Polaroid, you want to buy a Polaroid with 600 film. 600 film is more sensitive to light, and most of the cameras that use 600 have a built-in flash, unlike this Polaroid. This Polaroid has this top piece here, and you can mount a flash bar on top of it. And that flash bar allows you to give this SX70 film enough light to be usable. Otherwise, you need a lot of light to make this thing really work and to get that Polaroid look that you're looking for. I haven't shot this yet, so it's untested, and that's because I just haven't, had the drive to go and buy SX70 film online. And I really don't want to shoot it without the flash bar because I feel like I just won't have enough light. And I don't know, this thing focuses on everything. There's really like no focus. So it's like a hit or a miss, and that's why it's a cheap camera, and that's why they go for real cheap. So I would say avoid all SX70 cameras unless you're a Polaroid diehard who wants to suffer with underexposed and horrible looking Polaroids. But, that's up to you. So, next. Let's move on to 2000 cameras. This is, roughly 2000s. I don't know exactly when it came out, but if you're trying to get, a different sort of vibe, you're not going to get that really old high 8mm tape sort of look, like VHS kind of whatever. But you will get a different, digital video look by using this Handycam, and you're using DVDs, so it's a different experience. It's not just easily accessible footage. Next camera. The next camera I have is the high 8mm tape video camera. These are really cool. If you're trying to get that vintage VHS look, this is really convenient, and a lot of them, still work. You'll just need to purchase one of these, and that will allow you to convert these high 8 tapes to digital. So, I recently took this to like a party or something, and I took video on here, and it looks really cool. And, you got a screen, and you got this like whole light kind of thing going on, which is super fun. And, the batteries don't last too long because they're all junk now. And that's one of the biggest issues with these digital, cameras. They're not like the 70s film cameras or whatever that are completely manual or that don't have any batteries at all. But, it's an interesting little fun thing that you can mess around with. These are cool. I definitely recommend, if you're trying to get that VHS look, using one of these guys. Okay, next. So a lot of people love shooting on these little guys. This one I never got to work, and I can't really find the cable used to charge it. And, I don't even know how this battery would be charged. I just don't think I have a charger for it. And I think you charge it in camera, but maybe not. That's just the difficulty with these digital things is, it was new technology. And so all these different ports are extremely weird, and there's no like industry standard like USB-C or, you know, whatever. So they're kind of difficult to get working, but if you have everything and you can get it working, then yeah, by all means, mess around with these guys, because they kind of have an interesting look to them. You know, this is only 5 megapixels, and so it's definitely got that vintage early 2000s kind of look, and they look kind of cool. So okay, moving on. My personal favorite, 35mm film. And we're gonna start with an older camera. These cameras are very difficult to work with. This is an extremely old Pony 135. It's very cool looking, and I haven't tried it out yet. The thing is that, you know, these cameras are going to be difficult to get working, and so if you're trying to really get into 35mm film and you're just getting started, you're not going to want to start with one of these older cameras. They're very finicky, and the shutter speed, I don't know how reliable this really is. So you'd have to do a test on each shutter speed to get it, to see if they're, you know, accurate, because all of the shutter speeds kind of just seem the same. Moving on. Newer film cameras. So this bad boy is Nikon N6006. I use this all the time. This is, I think, the original flash and a quandary telephoto. It has autofocus, which is really nice, and it's a super cool aesthetic. Another cool thing about this camera, if you're not using a hot shoot, is it does have a built-in flash unit, which is really nice. You can throw this guy in program, even though I have Fomapan in this right now with like changing the ISO manually. But you have a bunch of different modes. You have program, aperture, shutter, and, you know, full manual. And it's got a lot of, you know, bells and whistles, which is nice to have. And a lot of people have these laying around. So, you know, do some searching, and, you know, in a relative's house, and ask them if you can take one of their old junk film 35mm cameras, especially one of these. These are really nice to get started on, and they're really not that expensive. So yeah, that's that. I love this guy, and super cool. Highly recommend. Okay. And now for my personal favorite, the classics. So this is the Minolta X700. You know, you've seen me use this before and talk about this all the time. I love this camera. It's been giving me a lot of problems, and that's what happens with cameras that are 40 years old. So we're getting a little older here. We're in the sweet spot. Not as old as that Pony 135 that I showed you, and not as new as that Nikon N6006 that I showed you, but this is where the magic happened. And this is a good camera if you'd like to get into the aesthetic, and, you know, if you're trying to really stretch your photography and get out of your comfort zone with one of these cameras. The Minolta X700 is great because it has program, aperture priority, and obviously full manual. But, you know, I don't use the program mode, and I don't use the aperture mode. I just use it full manual. And most of these older SLRs, you would use full manual, because except for the you know, Canon AE1 program or whatever, those have better automatic settings, but I just don't know how much I trust the automatic settings in these older cameras. But, you know, it's certainly cool. I have on here, you know, one of the original flashes, and not an original, but added motor drive, which is super cool. It has the aesthetic. I don't use it that often, but yeah, and this is 35mm. It's a little on the more difficult to use side if you're just getting started. So, you know, be aware of all these styled SLR cameras from, you know, out of the 70s and 80s and even 90s. They are aesthetically beautiful, and they'll get you out of your comfort zone, which is cool, along with the whole 35mm film line if you're into that. So yeah, I love this camera. It's got the Rocore X 50mm f2 on it, and she's a beaut. But I'm going to move on from you soon, buddy, and we're moving on right now. The next thing I'd like to talk about is flashes. So there's a lot of difficulty with these flashes starting out. There's newer flashes, there's, you know, older and correct to your camera flashes. These newer flashes are great, They're reliable. They're literally for modern day cameras that are digital. And so, you know, they work with film cameras, especially if they have just a single point like this one. And, you know, they're very convenient because they are reliable. And you want a flash to be reliable, especially in a film camera. These other flashes are pretty good. I mean, they're overly complicated, and beginner would be lost on how to use this. And it's very difficult to find instructions or, you know, tutorials to how to use these flashes because a lot of them are completely different and have their own little way of working. If you're looking for reliability, I would use a modern day flash. The only issue with this flash is that if you're using it on a manual film camera directly, you're going to have to use another camera to measure the flash. Just because you can't actually calculate in here distances based off your lens and ISO and everything like that. This doesn't need that because this is for digital cameras, but you can always take a photo on your digital camera, basically where your film camera is, and test it out, especially if you're bouncing flash. Unless you have a light incidence light meter or a flash incidence light meter, then in that case, just, you know, meter the bounce and shoot away on the modern day flash. But that's it for flashes. Okay, so what have we learned? Commonalities between all of these cameras. You gotta do your research. Everyone's different. There might be certain types that you can't use anymore, like the pack film Polaroid. There might be some Polaroids that look really cool and that are really cheap you think are still, but then you can't really use it and the film is difficult to get. With the SX70 film, with some newer digital cameras, you might have them laying around. They might be a good fit for you, but they might not be what you're looking for in terms of aesthetic and whatever. Some film SLRs require a battery to even work, like the Minolta X700. That might be something that you don't want to deal with if you're shooting star photography at night, if you live in Canada or whatever. Some other SLRs they don't need a battery at all. But, you know, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of cameras out there. Another thing, I put together a Patreon for anybody who loves this content, all 70 of you and others. I have a Patreon where you can support my projects. I have other projects that I'm working on as an entrepreneur, but this channel is on the Patreon. I'm working on putting together plans for the Patreon. So if you'd like to support this channel and you like this type of content, then awesome. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. Do your research and go digging for cameras in your basement. You might find something cool. You might find a gem, and make sure you take care of it. They don't make these anymore. Okay. Goodbye, and stay tuned for more film photography related content. Peace.